Welcome to Pores and Prose. This is another installment of all the books that I enjoy reading. And for this particular video, we are going to talk about all of the books that I have read so far this year. Honestly, when I started this booktube, I was so scared to even publish my first video. It took a while for me to edit, get it off the ground, and I was really nervous just about the whole thing in general because doing new things in life is hard. So, that being said, this video was a long time coming, but I really want to catalog and talk about all the books. These are the physical books that you see in front of me in this massive stack. And then I also read some books via my Kindle through the Libby app, which if you don't know what that is, it is an app that is an online library essentially. You can get audiobooks, you can get ebooks for your Kindle. And so yeah, we're going to talk about the books I've read so far this year. We're going to call this January through March reading recap. I might start doing videos monthly of the books that I have read. I might, who knows how this is all going to go down. These are the books that I have read so far in 2026. So grab your coffee or tea. In this case, this is a decaf black tea from Trader Joe's with some honey. Cheers. Let's get into it. Oh yeah. That's that's really warm. You also will probably see me referencing my phone so I can remember what I read. All right, let's get into it. So the first book that I read technically finished January 1st. So we're counting it into the 2026 books that I've read, and that was the first Hunger Games book. Now, I have read Hunger Games before. I actually am in a book club and we are reading the whole series. We have a member in our book club that has not read the Hunger Games, and so we thought we should introduce her to the Hunger Games. I gave this book 5 stars. It was such joy to reread the whole Hunger Games series as a whole. I'm going to talk about them more in this video because in the past 3 months I finished all 3 books, including Sunrise on the Reaping, which we'll get to. I read the first Hunger Games book and gave it 5 stars, and that was the first book that I read in 2026, which, did I say 2025 in this video? I might have, we'll edit that out. Anyways, Hunger Games was the first book I finished. The next book, I'm going to move right along to the next one because I'll talk about Hunger Games more, is the Jasad Crown. This book is by Sarah Hashem, and I gave this book the ranking of 4 stars. This was such an excellent duology. So there is the Jasad Heir and the Jasad Crown, and I finished this duology. I started the Jasad Crown, I want to say back in the fall, October, November. It was a recommendation on a podcast and legitimately was so shook by this book. It is an Egyptian-inspired fantasy duology. It is excellent. The first book I think I gave 4.5 stars, and the second book was 4 stars, just because the way it ended wasn't necessarily how I wanted the book to end, but it was so good. Highly recommend it if you are looking for a fantasy series that is a short fantasy series and easy to read. I absolutely love the Jasad Crown. Sarah Hashem is a new author to me, but she is actually in the works of writing another series, and I definitely will be reading it. Just something about reading an Egyptian-inspired fantasy and reading something completely out of my wheelhouse when it comes to fantasy and reading a duology. It was such a fun time. So I read the Jasad Crown next, and then after the Jasad Crown, I read Throne of Glass. So Throne of Glass I read next. That's my 3rd book that I read this year, and this is definitely a reread for me. So I did a previous video talking about all the books that I read by Sarah J. Maas, and I am rereading the Throne of Glass series. I kind of decided that this would be a wild, crazy thing to do, but to be honest, I love this series. I own the whole series, and I don't have the physical copy on me because I am letting somebody borrow the first 2 books in this series. So I read Throne of Glass, and I will be honest, this time around reading it, it was a lot more cringy than the first time. I remember the first time reading it kind of not being super like in shock and awe of the first book, but also not quite as let down as I was this time around. But we read Throne of Glass, we finished it. I actually changed the rating for this book. I rated it 3.25 stars. And honestly, that is just because I liked the trajectory of the story. I like where it's going. Obviously, I've read it before and I know what's gonna happen to our main character, Selena, but I just really didn't quite enjoy it this time. So Throne of Glass is about Selena Sardothian. She is an assassin and she is trying to win to become the King's Championship. That's a really short plot synopsis. So there we go. All right, next up, I get to move all of these stacks of books because the next book that I read this month was The Lincoln Highway by Amor, Towles. I'm actually planning on doing a video about new to me authors this year and last year, basically new authors in general that I have read and love everything that they have written. And Amor Towles is definitely one of those authors. This book was such an interesting historical fiction. I'm gonna briefly explain the plot to you and just then give my rating for this book. So this author, Amor Towles, wrote a book called A Gentleman in Moscow. I read it last year. I'll talk about it probably in another video in the future. But I really liked this author's way of telling a story and the way of writing historical fiction. Just such interesting prose, very cool characters that he writes, and the plot and the setting that he chooses is always super fascinating, historically speaking. So when I read The Lincoln Highway, first off, I was super intimidated by this book. It doesn't look massive, but I want to say it's 575 pages. It's a pretty hefty book. The print inside the book, I don't know if you can see this or not, but the print inside the book is smaller per page. So it is a hefty book. I was very intimidated to read it, but I'm gonna tell you why I love it so much. First off, it is a book that is about a boy, kind of a boy. He's technically a teenager, and he spent some time in prison. Basically, he got into trouble. You find out about it in this book, and the main character of this book, his name is Emmett Watson, and he lives in Nebraska. He is actually being sent home from prison. He kind of got early leave from prison. He went to kind of like a teen labor youth prison camp essentially for his crime. And he gets to come home early because his father has passed away, and he has to take care of his brother Billy. Well, Emmett comes home, the police officer drops him off, leaves him, says, okay, figure out like all of your inheritance. And Emmett's friends from prison hide in the back of the cop's car and jump out and say, we're here. And their names are, both are guys, Duchess and, I wasn't prepared for this. Wooly. Duchess and Wooly. There we go. We remembered it. So Duchess and Wooly are Emmett's friends from prison, but they are huge troublemakers. And the way that the Lincoln Highway kind of comes into this book is Emmett and his brother Billy want to drive the Lincoln Highway to meet their mom. Their mom kind of abandoned them several years ago, and they just on a whim decide we're gonna go meet our mom. Well, chaos ensues with Duchess and Duchess and Wooly, and it becomes kind of a massive crazy plot twist. You see all these things happen to these characters, and this book is really interesting in the fact that it takes place in a span of 10 days. And you don't read this book in terms of chapters, you read it in terms of days. So you'll see day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way to 10 days in the book. And you find out why it's 10 days in the plot line. I don't want to give that part away, but all in all, this book was such a fascinating historical fiction book. I honestly don't think I have ever read a book that weaves in a piece of history that honestly I didn't really learn about growing up, but incorporates just such memorable, fun characters. You fall in love with the boy, Billy, Emmett's brother, so hard and so fast. And the tenderness in this book, there are some really sad things that happen, specifically with one of the other minor characters. I won't say who, but definitely look up trigger warnings for sure if you're someone that is sensitive to certain items or things happening in plot lines. But I cannot recommend this book enough, and that is going to be The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. I rated this book, I believe, gotta look at the trusty phone, 4.5 stars on Fable. So I love this book. It was a really, really fun time. Okay, the next book that I read is also in this stack. I think now we're getting to some of the books that I actually had on my bookshelf, and that is The Horse and His Boy by C.S. Lewis. I am actually rereading currently the Chronicles of Narnia series, and I might have to do a video about this. It has been so fun to reread these books. I have not read this series in such a long time. It's probably been at least high school, maybe college I listened to them as an audiobook, but either way, it's been almost a decade, truly, since I've read these books, and I have been slowly collecting them from thrifting them, honestly, from bookstores, and I thought, let's read this series, it'll be a fun time, and let me just tell you, it has been such a fun time. So I read The Horse and His Boy. This is the third book in the Chronicles of Narnia series, and I actually, funny enough, used to love the installment. This book used to be my favorite, but as I'm rereading the series, I don't know if it's my favorite anymore. I still love the story of Shasta. I still love that you are kind of in the world of Narnia all the way through. This book takes place during King Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy's reign, and so it kind of takes you back in the storyline after the end of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But regardless, this is a fantastic book, and what I love about Chronicles of Narnia books is they're so teeny. They're like 200 to 250 pages, so really easy reads. On Fable, I rated this one 4.5 stars. Loved Horse and His Boy. Okay, moving right along, we're going back into the Hunger Games series. So the next book that I read was Catching Fire. I gave this book 5 stars. I feel like this time around I rated all of the Hunger Games books 5 stars. Catching Fire is one that I remember reading in college and just being like, oh, this is getting serious. We're really getting into what Katniss is about, what she's doing, how she is slowly turning into the Mockingjay and becoming a symbol of hope for the people of Panem. And she really is just creating a name for herself, but also creating some trouble, some good trouble in this book. And I loved rereading Catching Fire. There were so many characters that will come back into play when I talk about Sunrise on the Reaping when I get to that one, but I truly loved rereading this one. Excellent. If you've never read the Hunger Games series, you need to read them. I didn't really go over the plot lines. I think they've been out long enough that people should know what they are about. But if you don't know what they're about, comment down below and give me the gist. But that's Catching Fire, and I rated it 5 stars. It was a reread for me as well. Alrighty, next up, we have another book that I don't have my hands on right now, but I do own, and that is the second book in the Throne of Glass series. It's Crown of Midnight. This one I rated 3.75 stars, and I will be honest with you. This one was a struggle for me to read. I had such a hard time just getting through this book. I really just struggled because I know what's going to happen with Selena. I know the end game. And this second book, Crown of Midnight, without giving too much away, Selena is just still an assassin going through her life, but there are pieces of her life that you're starting to discover and find out about and uncover and realize she's not all that who she says she is. She's hiding things from people, but she also has major trust issues, and you kind of start to see that unfold in the rest of this book. And I just really struggled to connect with her in this book. I struggled to understand some of her decision makings. I did understand why so many people can't stand Chaol. I loved Chaol the first time reading him through. I still don't dislike him. I think when I read Heir of Fire, we'll see how I feel about him the second time around, but there were parts of Crown of Midnight where it was cringy and hard to get through. I did rate it higher because there were parts of Crown of Midnight where I was breezing through it. I was super excited to not only be rereading it, but the plot was just so good. The characters were so great, and it just felt like a warm hug as a reader to read something that's comforting and fun. But with that being said, that's Crown of Midnight. Then, moving right along, I believe I have this next book. I do have this next book. We stayed in the same series, moving right along. I read Assassin's Blade next by Sarah J. Maas. This book is really unique. So first off, I rated this full 5 stars all the way. I love Assassin's Blade, and I love the way that this book brings back past life of Selena Sardothian as an assassin. You find out so much more about her. You find out why she has trust issues from Crown of Midnight, and you also just learn more of who she is as a heroine in this book series. And I have to say, I truly just love this story. I love the way that it's basically 5 short stories, 5 novellas about Selena's life before she becomes a prisoner in, the name will come to me, I believe it's Endivere. I'll correct myself if I got that wrong, but Selena becomes a prisoner in Endivere, and you find out why that happens in this book. You just find out all of her backstory, and it's so good. It's so unique and fun, and it truly is a really fast page turner. At least I feel like anyways, and I get excited to read it. So that is the Assassin's Blade, 5 stars. This is when Throne of Glass just becomes truly incredible. The next book, I read this book actually looking on my Fable January 30th through February 6th. This is First Time Caller by B.K. Borrison. Now I am going to go over a plot of this one. This is a semi-newer published book in the romance world or realm. I had read one other book by B.K. Borrison, and that was Good Spirits, and loved that one. That's a great Christmas book if you need one way down and back in December of 2026. Anyways, First Time Caller is essentially about a guy named Aiden Valentine. He runs a radio show, he talks to people, gives them love advice, and he's not really great at his job anymore. He doesn't enjoy it, doesn't like it. Well, we find that Lucy Stone is a character who is a mechanic, and she's a single mom, and her daughter calls into the radio show one night trying to ask for dating advice for her mom. Well, Lucy jumps on the phone, says, "Who are you talking to?" She starts talking to Aiden. She makes a guest appearance on the radio show essentially that night, and it becomes a viral hit. People watch Aiden talking to her and they go, "Oh, like, who is this girl? Who is he giving romance advice to? Why isn't she on the show?" And basically she becomes a more temporary, permanent guest on the show, but then they start to have feelings for each other, and you kind of just see this really fun, just beautiful romance budding. This one, I believe, is based off of Sleepless in Seattle. I will correct myself if I'm wrong on that, but essentially B.K. Borrison is writing 3 books. They're in the Heartstring series, I believe, and this is the first one, First Time Caller. I actually just bought the next book, And Now Back to You. I'm planning on reading it this spring, and this book, though, it was so great. I rated it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really fun time and really good. However, I have a couple remarks about it. Number 1, I feel like everything kind of just wrapped up in a tidy bow. There wasn't, there was conflict, but not conflict. There was a lot of tension, but then just the reasons behind them potentially not getting together. I don't remember a ton of how the conflict emerged, but it just didn't seem believable to me. And I know romance books, truly, when you think about conflict, it's usually not that big of a deal. I feel like the only author that writes really, really good conflict, in my opinion, is Abby Jimenez. And also, I do think Emily Henry does a really good job of writing conflict. Here's why I like B.K. Borrison. B.K. Borrison knows how to write brilliant banter between characters. Now, you could argue Emily Henry and Abby Jimenez do the same thing, but I honestly love the way that BK writes romances. I love the way that she showed a single mom in this book. You really don't find a lot of romance books nowadays anyways that talk a lot about single motherhood, but this was a beautiful portrayal of that. I loved Lucy Stone as a character as a whole. She was awesome, truly such a fun character to read, and would highly recommend this if you're looking for a fun, just romantic book. I mean, it is pink. I love the cover. I think the cover is so fun. Maybe even read this in Valentine's. Who knows? All right, the next book that I read is Lakeshire Park by Megan Walker. Now, this is when we're getting into February. This is when I'm kind of in just a romantic mood. This book I rated 4.75 stars. This was a surprising book for me. So a little bit about this book. This is a British Regency romance book. So if you like that kind of genre of romance, you'll really like this book. If you like Jane Austen, you'll really like this book. It kind of gave me somewhat of Jane Austen vibes, but essentially you have 2 sisters, Amelia and Clara. I always have to read the back of the books because there's obviously so many. I can't keep track of them all, you guys. But Amelia and Clara, they are sisters. Their stepfather is really sick and they need a dowry of some kind essentially to live. And Amelia wants to set her sister Clara up with a man named Ronald. They get invited to Lakeshire Park. They go there and Amelia meets a man named Peter. Peter is trying to set up his sister with the same guy, Ronald. And so obviously Amelia and Peter, they clash a lot, but they might also have a thing for each other too in the book. I love the way that Amelia and Peter meet in this book. It's a very just so interesting, neat, cute, and so funny. This book had just such clever love story writing. I really like reading romances that are Regency romances. I'm finding that the way, the subtlety, the flirtatiousness without being overly spicy, the ability to do such fun, cute date ideas in the 1800s, I just find is so fun. And it honestly, after reading this book, I wanted to go grab a Jane Austen book. So that is Lakeshire Park by Megan Walker. Would highly recommend it. And I gave this book 4.75 stars. So I read this book. Okay, and then next up, I took a massive turn. I read a book called Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, I rated this book 3 stars. I have read one other book by R.F. Kuang, and that is Yellowface. I loved that book. I will definitely have to do a video about that book or have that book be a part of a video. It's such a good book, and I had really high hopes for Katabasis. Oh, here's what Katabasis is about. You have 2 main characters. I can't even remember their names. Okay, so you have a girl named Alice Law, now that I had a chance to look up her name. She works at basically the equivalents of Yale or Harvard. And it might even say in the book where she's working anyways. She works in the field of magic, which magic in the world London Regency area, it doesn't matter. Magic, she essentially writes chalk, it creates enchantments, things. Based on that alone, you can probably tell it was hard for me to follow. But basically, her professor, Professor Grimes, gets stuck in the underworld of hell. And she needs that professor to basically get her degree. There's a lot of things tied to Professor Grimes. And so she decides she's going to go to hell to get him. Now, what she doesn't know is that there is another boy there, and his name is, oh goodness, I don't even remember his name, y'all. I think his name's Peter, maybe. Anyways, she goes with a mystery dude down to hell, and it kind of started off really fascinating. I knew it was going to be like a dark academia fantasy genre technically, and to be honest, I read it because I love R.F. Kuang. I rated it 3 stars. Honestly, I was really tempted to even give it less than that. I just feel like this book was so tough to follow at times. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't amazing either. I loved the idea of that author's view of what hell would be like. I thought it was really interesting. There's different levels that you have to go through and different things. It wasn't a bad idea. I just think the way that the book was written, the plot line didn't grip me all the way. So that is Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. I give it 3 stars. I would love to read more by R.F. Kuang, to be honest, but I am now a bit scared to read anything else by her. I'm also worried that Yellowface was probably the only book that I enjoyed by her, which is so sad because I do think R.F. Kuang is a talented writer, but I also think it just didn't captivate me as well. I'd be curious to know in the comments if any of you watching this have read Katabasis and your thoughts on the book as a whole. So that was Katabasis. Moving right along, after Katabasis, let's see what my Fable app says. I read next Mockingjay. So this is the 3rd book in the Hunger Games series. I gave this book also 5 stars. I think rereading series sometimes, if you can't tell, I'm doing that right now in my reading life. Rereading books sometimes is just so much fun. I really enjoy just getting a chance to be able to go back into a world that I really enjoyed, and Hunger Games is one of them. So Mockingjay I gave 5 stars. I remember reading this book in college and just going, wait, what's going on? I don't understand all of this. Y'all, 10 years later, as an adult, seeing what's happening in our government and our world, I 100% totally get all of the choices that Suzanne made. They were brilliant choices in the book. Mockingjay was excellent. So sad, and I cried several times reading this book. Honestly, this time as an adult, but it's a book that needs to be written, and it is so important. So that was the next book, Mockingjay. And then I switched gears. Sunrise on the Reaping came, and I decided to read it. And you guys, I pretty much cried a lot. I cried a lot over that week and a half of reading Mockingjay and then Sunrise on the Reaping. Sunrise on the Reaping is Haymitch's story. So you're way backpedaling, and there's characters like Effie, Mags, Beatty, so many characters that come back, but they're part of Haymitch's life in a way. Y'all, this book wrecked me. Sunrise on the Reaping was so sad. I cried several times. I audibly gasped several times reading this book. But oh my gosh, this might be like truly, if I were gonna like tier rank Hunger Games books, this would be one of the top ones. I thought this was just such a brilliant way to portray Haymitch's story. It makes sense that he is the way that he is. Do not read this book if you have not read Hunger Games. You will not understand half of the significance of the characters or the people if you do not read the Hunger Games original trilogy. Just putting that out there. But oh my gosh, this book was like incredibly sad, and it gutted me, truly gutted me, but it was so good. ugh. Okay, so that's what I read, Sunrise on the Reefing. I gave it 4.5 stars, but to be honest, I may go back and give it a 5-star because, yeah, it was just so, so good. Okay, moving right along. I think we're making progress. We're doing okay. We're getting kind of down to the wire. I read Prince Caspian. I cannot stand this cover, by the way, y'all. I need to get the cover that matches this one, like the pretty scholastic cover of all the other ones. Ugh, gosh, it's gonna bother me this entire book, but this entire video. But I read Prince Caspian next. I rated Prince Caspian 4 stars. I'm gonna be honest, I can rock with Prince Caspian. I enjoyed reading this book. I thought it was just so fun. Again, going back to Chronicles of Narnia, there's just things about these books that you just pick up time and time again. It's a book that you never lose interest to me or sight of plot, and you find and discover so many things as you reread these books. Truly a classic. Love Prince Caspian. Rated a 4 stars. And that's all I gotta say about it. If you've never read Chronicles of Narnia, you should read Chronicles of Narnia. Okay, next up, moving right along, we're getting to the tail end of this. We have The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. Like I've already talked about, I'm rereading Chronicles of Narnia and love this one. Man, reading this one, I gave it 5 stars. Something about this book in particular in Chronicles of Narnia. It's another one I could get emotional about talking about. I think in my life right now, I forget so much of how life truly is a journey, and you really don't know where it's going to take you. You don't know what journeys are going to come next. You don't know who potentially you're going to meet. And in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, that is such a true take in this book. And you see just the trajectory of so many different characters, of Reepicheep, of Eustace, of Lucy, of Edmund. If you know, you know. And you read this book and just, there are so many life applications to this book. I absolutely love rereading Chronicles of Narnia. I read The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. You haven't heard me say it enough in this video. You should read the Chronicles of Narnia. If you've never read it, that's all I've got to say. So that is Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis, and I gave this one 5 stars. Okay, up next, I actually just came from the movie theater because I saw the movie Project Hail Mary, and that means I read the book Project Hail Mary. Guys, this book, I gave this book 4.5 stars. This book is Project Hail Mary by the one and only Andy Weir. Maybe I'm just somebody who has not looked enough into the sci-fi genre, but I'm really not a science fiction reader. I never have been. I don't find it a genre that I love, but oh my gosh, this book just convinced me to become a science fiction reader. Cannot tell you why, I just absolutely loved this book. I loved the humor, the hilarity, the seriousness of this book in so many ways. Project Hail Mary is about a biology teacher named Ryland Grace, and he has the key to saving Earth. And you watch him journey and discover himself throughout this book in so many ways. I don't really want to say anything else because I feel like that could spoil the book as a whole and spoil a lot of what happens in the book. But this is a book that I read where I'm literally reading it on my Kindle. I'm at the 40% mark and something pivotal happens in the book that just blew my mind. I couldn't believe it happened. And once you read the book, you should go see the movie. The movie was just perfection. So that's Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Okay, rounding up the end of March. And this one, I don't know if it was, necessarily the best ending I've had considering all these other books that I've talked about. But this is the book, Oh My God, What a Complete Eiling by Amor McLysett and Sarah Breen. This book, it's actually I want to say 4 or 5 book series. Basically, a really good a really good friend of mine, she went to Ireland last year, came back and brought me a book, which that's what all good friends do if they know that you're an avid reader like my friend did. And she brought me this book, and she actually ended up buying the 3rd book in the series, so then went back as any good friend would and bought books 1 and 2. So this is book 1 of the Eiling series. This was a good time. I rated it 3 stars. I wouldn't say it's the best book I've ever read. I wouldn't say it's the worst book I've ever read. It definitely touched on some topics that I personally would struggle to say that I 100% agree with, and so that was an interesting thing to have happened to me as a reader, but also I think it's really interesting to read a book that's written by an Irish author. I think it's fun to read books that are not by American authors, and I can really appreciate that about this book. There was so much Irish culture that I learned about, so many just idioms and phrases and ways that Irish people talk about things, and I loved it. So I plan on reading the other books in this series, not just because my friend got them for me, but also because I find Eiling an intriguing character. And I really feel like this book, I can't give a huge plot line to, because if I do, it spoils certain things, but you're really just following an Irish character named Eiling who is trotting through life, figuring herself out like we all are. And I think that's why it was appealing to me and amusing as a reader. So that's Oh My God, What a Complete Eiling by Amor and Sarah Breen. I rated this one 3 stars. Another book that I don't think I'm gonna finish by the end of March is Air of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. So we'll save my thoughts on it for the next video. I hope that you enjoyed getting to watch me catalog this longer video that I've made about the books that I read January through March. Please like and subscribe. Comment down below of the books that you have read so far in 2026. I, of course, probably don't need any more recommendations because I have a ton of books on my bookshelf, but I always like adding things to my TBR, so you can just add it. I hope you enjoyed this installment of Pores and Prose. Cheers, and we will see you next time. I goofed up massively. Not really, but oh, let's talk about it. Okay, so I'm still learning how to edit videos, and yeah, the camera only lasts for 30 minutes and then it cuts off. So obviously it cut me off in talking about these 2 books and one more that I read way back in February. So I'm just gonna talk about them right now and wrap up this video with me in a different outfit. And thankfully I realized this halfway through editing the video and then decided, well, let's just fix this, shall we? So next up, I read After Prince Caspian. I read this book to wrap up the month of February. This is Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. This book, I rated 4.75 stars. I must say, in this lineup as I'm going through it, I read some really, really good romance books. Can we just have a moment for the frayed edges, the pretty frayed edges? Okay, this book is about Emma Wheeler, and Emma Wheeler is a writer. Her dream is to become a screenwriter for a movie. Hasn't had that happen. She's had a lot in her life go on with her father, his health. Her sister hasn't really been a part of that too much, but then in walks in one of her old high school friends and says, hey, how would you like to rewrite a screenplay for a screenwriter who wrote a really terrible romance movie? And they talk about it in the book. It wasn't great. And Emma decides to go rescue him. Absolutely loved this book. I think Catherine Center is just, number one, she is such a brilliant romance author. I was not expecting to read a book that had the main male character be a super rich billionaire and be interested, but I low-key was. So this is a non-spicy closed door romance, which, to be honest with you, I am slowly starting to fall into that window of romances more. But I really, really enjoyed this one. First off, let's just appreciate this cover. It's so, so pretty and so just pink and girly. I mean, I read this book in February, which totally tracks. It makes sense. My next video that I'm gonna film very shortly is all about mood reading in the books that I think I will be in the mood for to read in the springtime. So this is a great book if you want to read it in February. And it is Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. I rated this book 4.75 stars. You should add this to your TBR. This would even be a great book, honestly, to read in the summer and springtime. Would highly suggest it. Okay, next up, I do not have this book on hand. So that I read was called Ain't Nobody's Fool, which classic me, don't remember who it's by. Hold on. Ain't Nobody's Fool by Martha Ackman. And this is a biography memoir about the lovely Dolly Parton. And I personally am somebody that is obsessed with Dolly Parton. When I saw this book come out on the Libby app that I was talking about earlier, I was super intrigued. It's actually a newer published book about Dolly and her life. This is one that I would recommend anybody if you're remotely curious about Dolly Parton and who she was as a singer-songwriter, but her life in general. I would definitely say to pick up this book. I feel like it had so much of Dollywood in it, so much of Dolly's life, you learn that she had a really rough start to being a singer-songwriter, but also even when she got famous, was on the Porter Wagner show, there were a lot of things that happened in her life. And so if you are a Dolly fan, I would highly recommend it, and that's Ain't Nobody's Fool by Martha Ackman. I rated it solid 5 stars. Solid 5 stars because it's Dolly Parton. Okay, finally, the book that I filmed myself halfway through talking about, but this book is My Friends by Fredrik Backman. Pause for the tea moment. Okay, this book. I really wish I could just somehow have captured my initial time talking about this book. I just had all of the just sad face, happy face, crying face. This book just, man, it hit a chord with me in such a beautiful way. So this is the second book that I've read by Fredrik Backman. I will talk about that in another video down the road. But this book is Fredrik Backman's most recent published book, My Friends. And essentially the plot goes a little something like this. We have a teenager named Louisa. She is in the foster care system. She's had a really difficult life, a trauma-filled life, and she is grieving the loss of a friend. And so she decides to go vandalize a painting. And the painting is a very famous painting. This famous painting is in a church building. And as she is running out of the building because she has to stop herself before she paints over top of it, she gets caught, she runs out, and there's an older gentleman in the back of the building. And turns out that gentleman is the actual painter himself. She has a connection with him, a very brief meeting that kind of changes the trajectory of the rest of the book and of her life. And due to that interaction, the painter gives her another piece of his artwork, and she meets a friend of the painter's, and she learns about the origin of the painting, how it kind of came to be, and goes on a really beautiful quest. And my heart melted all the way through this book. This is a book that I really do believe almost everybody should read. It touches on so many important aspects, not just of friendships, but of the beauty and ability to understand teenagers in such an incredible way, and also to see how trauma and life circumstances affect people and just the ways to be there for people. I love reading books about found friendship and found family, and this is one of them. I cried several times. I actually did not cry in this book as much as I did in the other book that I read by Fredrik Backman, but nonetheless, this book is a beautiful masterpiece. I'm so happy to have it finished, but also have it on my bookshelf. I honestly avoided this book at all costs because I just was nervous about it. I had heard different takes, read different reviews, was intimidated by it, but Fredrik Backman, he does not disappoint. He writes about just different mental health aspects, anxiety, depression, and it's just done so well. I will probably start crying the more I think about this, but you should pick up the book My Friends by Fredrik Backman. I very clearly rated this 5 stars, and I have to say, I just would give this to anybody and tell them to read it. Now, you want to have a tissue box handy, so that's good to know. Well, that is gonna do it for all the books that I read in January through March of this year so far. I read 20 books. My reading goal this year is 80 books, which I don't think I have mentioned or talked about, so we have a long way to go, and I don't know if I will make it, but we will try to at some point. So cheers.